Afternoon, everyone. How are we? Very briefly, before we get on to the Arthur Beterbiev versus Callum Smith fight, I just want to go back to the Victor Ortiz against Lawson fight. It's been revealed, I think it was actually from Tony Weeks himself. There's a report that's been on various sites online that prior to the fight, Tony Weeks, or there'd been a release, but apparently Lawson had been found or diagnosed with two aneurysms on the brain prior to the fight by one doctor. Then another doctor had cleared and said there was none. And this played a huge part in the seemingly massively sort of early stoppage of Lawson, which, if correct, if there's any doubt at all, one doctor says there's two aneurysms found, the other one says, surely you've got to have a more definitive answer than that. Surely you've got to go somewhere else. But if that's true, that certainly goes some way to explaining that decision. But have a look for that. I don't know if you might have heard that anyway. So this weekend, Callum Smith travels to Canada to take on Arthur Beterbiev. This is almost one of those perfect matchups, isn't it? This is a fight that, sort of, to use an old adage, you'd pay for this one, wouldn't you? Great matchup, potentially fantastic matchup. Both guys have suffered a lot of inactivity in their careers, but I think Beterbiev's has been, the majority of his inactivity has been forced through injury. Now, sort of going back to the Wilder fight, the Wilder-Joseph Parker fight from the other weekend, and we talked about Wilder's inactivity and how damaging inactivity can be, which it can. Sometimes in the sense where the inactivity is caused by recovering from injury, and injury forces you out of the gym. Inactivity is never good, no, but it can have a benefit of most athletes, especially fighters. No one is ever fully injury free. Everyone always has niggles, and people just perform through them and train through them. But inactivity forced through injury can be beneficial, because if you're forced away from the gym, if you have to rest and recover, it can have the effect of while you're recovering from the specific injury, your body's also recovering as a whole. Your whole body and every little niggle you are getting recovery from that. And sometimes anyone who trains, in any degree, especially if you train resistance sort of training, you'll find that you have a couple of weeks off, you come back and you feel stronger. You feel, you just feel rested. Sometimes the inactivity, if you're completely rested, it can be as beneficial sometimes as it can be detrimental sometimes. So I wouldn't read too much into that. If we look at this fight and we base it on each fighter's attributes, the physical attributes, and we compare those, Callum Smith really has all the attributes to make this fight pretty, or control this fight, because being the much longer man in reach and being the much taller man in height, you could almost win half of this fight just on controlling the real estate alone. If Callum Smith was active enough with the jab and purposeful enough with the jab and could keep Beterbiev offset with the jab and make Beterbiev really work for his openings, almost half of the battle is done. You could almost win this fight from the outside by controlling the distance with your greater length and your greater height. The problem for me with Callum Smith comes a lot of time with, and he does this a lot, and this was noticeable, especially in the Ryder fight. A lot of people say that Ryder won that quite comfortably, and he was robbed. To me, I think there's an argument for either men in that fight. I don't think anyone won it, obviously. I think Ryder had round 11, round 12, Ryder really come across well and won those two rounds clear. But there are a lot of rounds that were fairly quiet that I kind of edged towards Smith. So I wouldn't shout robbery whatever way that fight had gone. But I can certainly see the argument for people feeling Ryder won 100%. But in that fight, now, to me, if you're a taller, longer guy, you should never be the guy circling on the outside. You should hold centre ring. You should own centre ring. You should never be given centre ring up if you're a taller, longer guy. You should be controlling that with a jab. And the shorter guy should be the one circling on the outside or trying to work his openings under, around, or, past your jab. Smith is willing to give up centre ring fairly comfortably because Smith does enjoy the position of fighting with his back to the ropes and fighting off the ropes. Smith's surprisingly good on the inside. For a tall, long guy, he's surprisingly good on the inside and up close with his sort of short hooks, uppercuts. He's very compact for a big guy and does it really well. And that's fine if you're doing it against guys that you're sort of naturally bigger than and sort of naturally have an edge in power over and stature over, which he did against Ryder. We talk about Smith's punch power, but again, I mean, and I think Smith's best win, his highest level win, is probably against a faded George Groves. Against John Ryder, for all the apparent punch powder that Callum's punch powder, that's another subject. For all the apparent punch power Smith has, against John Ryder, he never ever looked like hurting or wobbling John Ryder at all. And he did it in clean numerous times through that fight. And Ryder wasn't bothered. Ryder's a tough guy. I really like John Ryder, a very underrated fighter. And if you certainly look at the two performances of Callum Smith's against Saul Alvarez, against Ryder's performance against Alvarez, although Ryder got beat up more badly, I thought Ryder's performance was better. I thought Ryder's performance was more admirable and more game than Callum Smith's. But Callum Smith doesn't really use his attributes to their full potential, of which because most guys he fights, he's longer than and taller than, but he doesn't make use of that because he's happy to fight off the ropes. Now, the problem with that against Beterbiev is if you're going to sit on the ropes against Beterbiev, you're in a world of trouble. Beterbiev makes you exert so much energy and so much mental energy and physical exertion through the constant pressure. And it's not even pressure while he's punching. It's pressure where he's just in front of you. He constantly gives you angles and different looks and never lets you set. He's got an assassin's mentality. He's just, and if you sit on the ropes, if Callum Smith elects to give up centre ring against Beterbiev and sit on the ropes, that's tantamount to suicide. Now, Callum Smith is very good on the ropes, and I've no doubt when Beterbiev will attack, when Callum Smith's on the ropes, Callum Smith will have his own chances. He can land that short hook, he can land those uppercuts, and Beterbiev does get hit, no doubt. He's particularly open to the hook from the inside and the mid-range. So that is certainly in Smith's favour. It's just that if you listen to any of the sparring partners that have sparred Beterbiev, and I've watched a few interviews over the last few days of 4 or 5 sparring partners or people who sparred him, they all have the same view of Beterbiev. Of he's just a different animal. He's made of different. Some guys are just made of different stuff. Even Beterbiev, when he gets hurt against, I mean, like the fight against Yard was really good. And a lot of people said in that they thought Beterbiev had lost a little bit. He'd aged a little bit. But to me, I thought Beterbiev was still great. I just thought he was up against Yard, and I thought Yard was great. I thought Yard put in a fantastic performance. I'm a big fan of Yard. Really underrated. I really think he deserved more in his career. Great fighter, Yard. Really big fan of Anthony Yard. But Anthony Yard put in a really good performance. And he hit Beterbiev with some monster shots. And Beterbiev kept coming. And every time Beterbiev, you felt that Yard was having success, and Beterbiev looked like there might be a way where Yard is coming into the fight and imposing his will, Beterbiev would come back ×2 and impose his will on top of that, and his physical aggression on top of that. He always had another level of, just call it whatever you want to call it, but every time you sense there may be a will or a time when Yard was getting on top, Beterbiev came back, turned it up a gear, and just came back with that true killer mentality. I look at Callum Smith and I think, for all the titles and the accolades he's got in his career, and he has a fantastic career, when you look at his records, to me, the achievements, the belts, and the accolades don't really match the names on the record, because his record isn't that impressive. And like I said, a lot of people believe he lost the John Ryder fight. And if it had been given to John Ryder, he wouldn't have complained that much. And then, like I said, his previous best win, probably his best win is a faded George Groves. And then when he fought Alvarez, and this is my problem, other than Beterbiev, I mean, if we look at this in terms of fights, I think Callum Smith's had about 10 more pro fights. So in fight years, you couldn't say Callum Smith is older, even though in age, Beterbiev is older. But Beterbiev was like 18 fights, 18, 19 fights, where Callum Smith is 28, 29 fights, something like that. So I just can't see past the Canelo result and the Canelo performance that Callum Smith kind of didn't put in. To me, is Callum Smith what you could sort of deem as an on-top fighter, where he performs very good or very well against guys he kind of knows he's sort of got the beating of already, or at least on a level playing as? Whereas he seems look like he went into the Alvarez fight really not expecting or believing he could win. And he kind of went in there and survived well, which he did, but never really did he have that killer mentality to go in and test himself, to go in and test Alvarez, to go and see, like, can I believe I can win. I will go in with the attitude of I will smash this guy to pieces till I smash my way to a victory, even if that means me getting stopped in. And that's the difference between killers, genuine killers, those ones that are made of different stuff. And this is what all Beterbiev's sparring partners talk about, that Beterbiev is just a different animal. I also believe Beterbiev's fought a better opposition. You know, I don't know if you agree, but when you look down the records, I think Beterbiev's is the one. So as much as I look at this, and as much as I look, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Callum Smith ends Beterbiev in 3 rounds, if he makes use of his natural ability and he is back to the ropes. Even though I believe tactically that's not good for him, he's good in doing it. And it wouldn't surprise me if Callum Smith drops Beterbiev with a short left hook or short uppercut from the ropes. But I just think being there in the first place is a gamble you don't want to take. And I just can't get the Alvarez fight out of my mind. Other than Beterbiev getting old overnight and aging overnight and being 50% of the man he was, for me, the age factor and the aging overnight factor is the only thing that puts this in the balance for me. Because I look at Beterbiev, and some guys are just made differently. Some just are. Anyone who's boxed, anyone who's spent their time in boxing gyms, we all know the guy in there. You know the guys in there. Some guys are just legitimate killers. They're different up here, and they're different physically. Beterbiev is one of those guys for me. So unless Beterbiev aging overnight, and unless Callum Smith, and this is the other thing, like I said before, I do wonder about Callum Smith's perceived power, because there are guys that he hasn't hurt. And as I say, John Ryder, he didn't hurt once. And you have to sort of question that, because if power is power, Deontay Wilder's power has hurt everyone who's, even Fury that he lost, his punches still dropped Fury. You still knew he was a puncher. If a genuine puncher hits anyone, Beterbiev, 19 and 19, pure power, genuine power. So I wonder about that. So I don't discount a win for Smith, but the fact that I can't see past the Alvarez performance, and the fact that I just believe, even if Smith hurts Beterbiev, I believe Beterbiev comes back stronger and harder and with a more killer instinct. And for that reason, if I had to put my house on it, I'd have to go Beterbiev. And I could be proved wrong. Smith could turn up and Smith could land those short uppercuts, those short hooks, and get a stoppage victory himself. He certainly has the attributes to do it, but I just think Beterbiev is a different animal, punches harder, faces better opposition, and has the more killer mentality. But great fight. Really looking forward to it. Potentially could be a fight of the year. Quite possibly, couldn't it? That quite easily. But let me know what you think. I'll see you all soon. Peace.